Okay, this is the Chapter 14 Most Missed Exam Questions, and most of these questions that were missed deal with how we are collecting our accounts receivable. So let's take a look at our first question. XYZ Company has completed its sales budget for the first quarter of year 2. Projected credit sales for the first 4 months of the year are as follows, or as shown. We expect our credit sales in January to be $38,000, February $44,000, March $53,000, and April $56,000. The company's past records show collection of credit sales as follows. 38% are collected in the month of sale, and the balance are collected in the following month. So what they want to know here is the total cash collections from receivables in March. So the way we'd figure that is, I'm going to probably show you a little more than what you need to know, but I think that's good for you to see the whole picture. Okay, so how do we collect our credit sales? In January, we're going to collect, and for January sales, we're going to collect 38% of those in January, in the month of sale, and we're going to collect the other 62% in the following month, which is going to be February. Same thing for February. We're going to collect 38% of February sales in February and 62% in March. For March, we're going to collect 38% of the March sales, credit sales in March, and 62% in April. And then for April, we'll collect 38% of April sales in April and 62% in May. And what we really want to record or focus on here is the total cash collections from receivables in March only. So for March collections, I've highlighted here what we really want to focus on. We want to focus on the February credit sales that we're going to collect in March, and we also want to focus on the March credit sales that we're going to collect in March. So it'll be February sales of $44,000 total times 62%, which will be collected in March. So that amounts to $27,280, and then March sales, the total will be $53,000, and we'll collect 38% of those in the month of sale, which comes out to be $20,140. So the total amount of collections of receivables in the month of March will be the sum of these two, which would be $47,420. This problem starts off with XYZ Company expects the following total sales. Total sales means there's a portion that are credit sales, there's a portion that are cash sales. So their total expected sales for March are $21,000, April $11,000, May $33,000, and June $16,000. The company expects 70% of its sales to be credit sales and 30% cash sales. So let's fill this in a little bit. 70% are on credit, 30% are cash. And so we'll get each of the breakdowns of each of these months as follows. $14,700 will be the portion of the total sales in March that will be credit sales, and the rest of them, or 30%, will be cash sales. Same thing for April. $7,700 in April sales total will be $7,700 for credit sales and $3,300 for cash sales. For May, $23,100 will be credit sales of the total, and $9,900 will be cash sales. And then in June, we'll have $11,200 will be credit sales and $4,800 will be cash sales. Now, they tell us that credit sales are collected as follows. 25% in the month of sale and 75% in the month following sales. So we'll lay all that out. So how are credit sales collected? 25% of these March credit sales of $14,700 will be collected in March, and 75% of those total will be collected in April. 25% of the April's credit sales, which are $7,700, will be collected in April, and 75% will be collected in May. And then the May credit sales of $23,100 will be collected as follows: 25% in May and 75% in June. And then for June, credit sales, 11,200, 25% of those credit sales will be collected in June, and 75% will be collected in July. Now, I should have looked at this first, but now we are at it now. So the question wants to know, what will be the budgeted accounts receivable balance on May 31st? Okay, budgeted accounts receivable balance. That means how much of these sales are we still going to have sitting in an account to be collected at the end of March, excuse me, at the end of May. So let's see if we can answer that question. And I'll do it by asking the question each of these months. I'll say, any accounts receivable balance on these sales at May 31st. Okay, so we have March sales. We have credit sales of 14.7. We'll collect 25% of those in March, and we'll collect the other 75% in April. So will there be a balance that setting to be collected on March sales, on March credit sales in on May the 31st? The answer is no, there won't be, because they're all going to be collected in either March or April. Let's take a look at April. For April, the credit sales are $7,700, and they're going to be collected as follows: 25% in the month of April and 75% in the month of May. So will they have, for April sales, April credit sales, will they have any balance to be collected on May 31st from those sales? And the answer is no. Let's take a look at May. May's credit sales are going to be $23,100. 25% of those sales will be collected in May, and 75% of those sales will be collected in June. So will they have a balance at the end of May to be collected? And the answer is yes. 75% of May's credit sales will be on the books at the end of May, waiting to be collected sometime in June. And so the answer is yes, they will have. Now let's look at June. You can see that in June, we're really ahead of the point we want to try to look at, which is May 31st. So this is really irrelevant, but I'll go through it anyway. In June, we're going to have credit sales of $11,200, and we'll collect 25% of those in June and 75% of those in July. But these June sales are past the date which we're looking at, which is May 31st. So the answer there is no. So to find out the amount of receivables that we'll have on the books on May 31st, we will say that May's credit sales, or May's total sales, times the credit sale portion, which in this case is 70%, times 75%, which will be the amount they're going to be collected in June that they'll still have outstanding on May 31st, will be the total sales for May, $33,000, times 70%, which is $23,100, which is the credit sales, times 75%, that's the portion that won't be collected in May but will be collected sometime in June, which comes out to be $17,325. And so that's your answer. In this problem, we have XYZ Company's sales budget shows the following expected total sales. January, $16,000, February, $20,000, March, $25,000, April, $48,000. The company expects 70% of its sales to be on account, that is, credit sales. So let's divide that up. 70% are credit sales, so therefore January, and then 30% are cash sales. So we'll have 11,200 and 4,800, 14,000 and 6,000, 17,500 and 7,500, and 33,600 credit sales in April, and $14,400 worth of cash sales. Now, credit sales are collected as follows: 25% in the month of sale, that's MOS, month of sale, 70% in the month following sale, which is MFMOS, and the remainder are uncollectible. So 25% in the month of sale and 70% in the month following sale would be 95% of those credit sales, so 5% are not going to be collected. So let's put that in there. So for January, for credit sales, our credit sales are expected to be $11,200. We'll collect 25% of that number in January, 70% in February, and 5% we'll write off. Same thing for February. For February's credit sales, we'll collect 25% in February, looks like 70% in March, and 5% we'll write off. Same thing for March. March's credit sales, 25% will be collected in March, 70% in April, the rest will be written off. And then in April, we'll collect, of the credit sales, we'll collect 25% in April and 70% in May, and the rest we'll write off. Now, here's what the question wants to know. What are the total cash receipts during April? Total cash receipts mean from cash sales and from credit sales. So automatically in April, we know that the cash sales we have here are $14,400, and we'll definitely be collecting that, and we'll also be collecting some portion of these past credit sales, which are going to be, we'll collect 70% of March's sales that are on credit in April, and 25% of the credit sales that are going to be for April in April. So here we go, three different cash flows. During March and April, we'll have March credit sales, which we have total sales in March of $25,000. 70% of those are on credit, so that means that $17,500 are going to be the total credit sales. 70% of those will be collected in April. That's the month we're looking at, April. And so that's a total of $12,250 from March credit sales that will be collected in April. For April, we're going to take the total sales for April times 70% will be on credit, which means that we'll have $33,600 worth of credit sales, and 25% of those will be collected in the month of April. So that gives us $8,400. And then we've got these April sales that are cash. They'll all be collected in cash in the month of April. And that gives us a total for those three cash flows of $35,050. And that's the answer we're looking for. In this question, XYZ provided the following information relevant to its sales for December year 1 and the first quarter of year 2. The first quarter would be the first 3 months of year 2, so it'd be January, February, and March. So they give us this information telling us that we have credit sales broken down into credit sales and cash sales, which would be actual sales that we had for year 1 December, $64,000, cash sales $14,000. In January, these are budgeted sales. These are what we think we're going to do for credit sales and cash sales. For January, it's $144,000 and $29,000 for cash sales. February, it would be $159,000 worth of credit sales and $34,000 worth of cash sales. And in March, we think we're going to have credit sales of $114,000 and cash sales of $16,000. Based on the company's collection history, 50% of credit sales are collected in the month of sale, and the remainder, which is 50%, will be collected in the month following sales. The question wants to know, what will cash collections in January from December credit sales be? Well, here's our December credit sales, $64,000. And we collect half of those in the month of sale, which would be in December, and we collect the other half of those in the month following sale, which will be January. So the cash that we're going to collect in January from December credit sales would be as follows. It will be the December credit sales times the percentage collected in the month following sale, which would be 50%. So that would be $64,000 of credit sales. Remember, half those are collected in the month of sale, which is December, and the other half of those are collected in January. So that'll be $32,000. And that's all they wanted. It's a relatively easy question, and maybe some people stumble on it because there's so much data here, and you got to pick out what's relevant and what's not relevant. Okay, this is the last question in our review, and it starts off with XYZ Companies expects credit sales for January to be $50,000. Cash sales are expected to be $30,000, and that's also in the month of January. So they think their credit sales will be 50 and their cash sales will be 30. The company expects credit and cash sales to increase 10% for the month of February. That is 10% over these numbers back here in January. Credit sales are collected in the month following the sale, okay? And based on this information, the amount of cash collections in February would be what? Total amount of cash collected in February would be how much? So let's set a little grid up on this. So we've got credit sales, cash sales. In January, I think our sales are going to be, credit sales that is, are going to be 50,000, and our cash sales are going to be 30,000. In February, we think that our credit sales and cash sales are going to be increased by 10% over January's numbers. So our credit sales for February should be 55,000. That's a 10% increase in credit sales there. And our cash sales for February should be 10% more than this number. And so 30,000 plus 3,000, that's 10%, would be 33,000. So how are credit sales collected? They're collected 0 in the month of sale, and they're collected 1 month after sale. All of it's collected. So for January, they would collect none of these sales in January, these January credit sales, but they collect all of them in February. And so for February, they would collect, for these credit sales, they would collect none of them in February and all of them in March. So the question goes back now to, what is the amount of cash collected in February? Well, the cash collected in February is definitely going to be all of the cash sales for February and all of the credit sales for January, since credit sales are collected the month after sale. So our answer will be, the amount of cash collected for February will be the January credit sales, and all of those will be collected in the month after, which would be February, 50,000, and all of the February cash sales. And this comes out to be $83,000. That's the end of our review, and good luck on the exam.